Bitcoin, the facts and fictions, the reality of changing from a world banking system to a digital global currency, the pros and cons of what this means, and what everyday people like you and I need to know. Tonight we're going to be talking about supercomputers, quantum computers, and conscious artificial intelligence. We're going to have a philosophical discussion of ethics, realities, and myths, and what we as species need to be worried about and what worries we may not need to have. Joining me is my special guest, Stuart Trusty. He is an engineer and architect of solutions for cutting-edge cluster computing applications for industry and network applications. His bioinformatics solutions, including distributed processing, as well as platforms for protoeomics, I hope I said that right, and computational fluid dynamics. His background includes certifications in Unix and Linux system administration. He's on the board of advisors of certification for Linux Professional Institute. He was part of creating a commercial certification for Linux Professional Institute as part of an industry board. And he is also CEO of Hot Mesh Security based in Atlanta. It's a mesh networking-based video security and Wi-Fi hotspot provider developing firmware based in, I think, Ethereum's chipset, hope I said that correct, and OLSR protocol. That sounds all very technical. He's going to make it easy for us tonight, guys. He's going to be talking about some serious subjects that we really need to have a better handle on so that we can understand where our world is headed. Thanks, Stuart. Welcome to the show, and thanks for being here.
Thank you. How would you like to start on this tack? That's a pretty broad set of subjects here. How would you like to narrow that down to start with?
Well, I sat down getting ready for tonight's show, and I said, there's also another topic I'd like to get into tonight, and we only have an hour to do it, but I think we can, and that's the deep web and the surface web and how Bitcoin plays roles and all that. So why don't we start there? Why don't you tell us exactly what we're dealing with when we talk about the deep web, the Internet? What is it? Why does it matter, and why do we need to know?
Okay. Well, there's reports that a majority of the Internet is in this dark web where it's not accessible by your browser, and to some extent that's exaggerated. I mean, there's a lot of company intranets out there. I mean, you can't go and access all of the content behind Bank of America, for example. So really, when we're talking about inaccessible content, I think that they're kind of lumping that together. When we're talking about the dark web, we're talking about basically international vendors for contraband goods, and it's subject to the same weaknesses in interacting with these vendors as the Bitcoin system affords. I mean, the Bitcoin system, basically everything is in Bitcoin. It uses It doesn't. When you access you run your web browser and you access a website. I mean, that goes between your computer and their computer. What the dark web is it interposes a set of a mesh network really that is called Tor, which was developed by the military, and any user. Any person running the web browser through the system becomes kind of transparent. You can't really tell where the origin is, and so it breaks up the data. So you have kind of an anonymized, and I say kind of anonymized connection, and then you can go and buy fake license plates or drugs or it's pretty much anything that is you could get is there. Is it important? I don't know. Certainly it's an unusual thing to have just very easily accessible by anybody. It's something you have to go looking for and want to involve yourself in and to explore. But it's actually a very easy, almost effortless thing to do with the right, USB drive or CD to boot. It's not a It's a very, very simple. Any Mac or a PC immediately can become a device on this network at will, really.
Yeah, I think when people hear about something like this, they automatically assume that it's a place where people go to do bad things. And in fact, the Silk Road case that came up last year with Ross Ulbright talked about these black markets and how Bitcoin was an anonymous type digital currency that allowed people to function in these black markets anonymously so that they could not be traced. And so when you talk about needing special access through Tor and other types of software to get into it, and how anonymous that can be and how also dangerous it can be if you really don't know what you're doing, I think it keeps people away from even looking, and they think, well, this is just a dirty, dark place for people to do bad things. But in reality, we also have governments holding a vast amount of information in the deep web, universities. So there's a storage capacity to the deep web. Yes?
Yeah, and deep web again. I mean, it's unusual to me how this whole idea of this deep web, dark web, and all this content, aggregating both the university and government labs and all that data, which is on private intranets, with this dark web Tor phenomenon, because that content's not available through Tor. That's content if you have maybe a card reader, or you have a password or whatever that takes to get behind these firewalls to get to the data. I mean, that's part and parcel of this government agency or that university or whatever. But it's not something you're going to find loading up Tor and tooling around with your Onion browser, which is kind of what it's called. It's an entirely different world. So and I would say roughly probably 80% of that deep web stuff is, basically we're just talking about private intranets. We're not really talking about something that you're going to penetrate by exploring it a different way. You'd actually have to be either given access or break into it, but it's not going to give itself up by browsing around in a Tor browser.
Yeah. Well, thank you for clearing that up so that we understand. Now, I think there's a fact about the surface web. When we talk about the surface web, we're dealing with the typical Google search engines, so on, Firefox. When I was researching this, I was really almost shocked to hear that or to read that we only access about 4% of total information when we do searches. We think we're accessing this big, vast, database, the internet, and we're pulling everything out, but we only really have access to about 4%. And do you find that people usually, assume and make these assumptions when they're dealing with internet and doing these searches that, I found it on the internet and this is the end all of information? What do you find is the norm when people start kind of acting shocked that the surface web is only about 4%? Do people know that? Stuart, or is this something?
I'd kind of qualify like this. Let's say that we were wanting to look at some case history, of some lawsuit, to try to get a class action together or something. And, we can go, use Google to access all the, public records and the county records and some of the court records and whatnot. And we could probably get a pretty good picture, but it's not like we have an account at LexisNexis and we can just log in and pinpoint what we want to find in a database so vast on the legal topics that it pretty much will dwarf the publicly available records, at least in a way that's organized and structured in a way you can actually find some case history and whatnot. So I don't think it's that unusual that this content exists. And it's just a matter of, it's like, well, how much information is this, this government agency holding? It's like USGS or NIH, is the National Institute of Health. Are they providing all of this, technical lab information? I mean, there's so many different security clearances and ways that this information has to be validated as far as who can access it, that I think it's pretty unsurprising that so much data is there. A lot of it, if you want to get at it, you have to go, try to do a Freedom of Information Act. I'd like to know this piece of information, but, all the money that's being spent on, government and research and et cetera, private industry, all this data is, private data. So it's not obscured data that can be accessed by non-standard means. It is private data held under, non-disclosure or, some other intellectual property that make that threshold to where you can't get at it. So to me, it's not that surprising, if that helps clarify.
No, it's not. It's not. I also compare it to the human brain, where we only have access to a certain small percentage of it. So they say, and then we have this vast, large amount that we can't access. It kind of reminds me of the model that the deep web and the surface web take. So, what do you feel? I mean, this is going to be kind of a broad question.
I heard some information from a source that a certain high level of security clearance. Someone said, I don't have my password to my email, and this person had such a high clearance that it not only pulled up the information of the password of this private industry account, but all that user's other passwords to all their other public accounts. And so there are definitely people with high level of access that do have access to this information kind of willy-nilly. It's just that the public doesn't have access to it. But the way that the system works, we don't really know the inner protocols and the backbone, how this was all laid out since the inception almost of the DARPA-created internet. We don't know how many safeguards have always been built in so that this data is always accessible. We can look at it from our perspective and go, yeah, we're kind of got this fishbowl approach to this data, but yeah, there's the Office of Total Information Awareness was out for a while, and that was basically to try to get all the information aggregated in one place and accessible from a top-down kind of a thing. And then there was complaint about that, and that division was disbanded, but the same technology continues. So if you're the right person, you have access to all kinds of information, but everyone else doesn't have that full access level. I guess I could put it that way, if that helps clarify.
Yeah, it does help clarify, and it also makes a lot of sense because information is power, and if you give that information to everybody, you're giving a lot of power to the people, so to speak. When you talk about the Bitcoin and the facts and the fictions, and we go into a digital currency, and people kind of might think, well, Bitcoin's just a fad. It's one of these things. It's a computer generation. It's something trendy for, the younger people to get into. It will never do anything. It won't ever really go anywhere. But in fact, recently PayPal just moved to make it a payment option, which to me signals that they're getting ready to kind of move Bitcoin in to become more mainstream. And they've also released the first debit card that can be paid using Bitcoin as well. So I want to kind of get into the Bitcoin phenomena next and talk about that a little bit. For our listeners, why don't you explain a little bit about what Bitcoin is exactly and where you think it's going?
Bitcoin is basically, you hear people talking about this blockchain. It's basically a log file that everyone has their eyes on. It's a distributed log file. It's more or less a ledger, and it shows the creation of digital assets, numbers on a balance sheet, different addresses that are created, and it basically is just a log of transactions. And that you do a transaction, you take a part of that number and you put it in a different account, and then you set it into this queue of all these other people doing the same thing, saying these transactions, and all these transactions occur over a certain period of time, and then there's a end of that block of transactions, and then it's kind of processed in a fancy way, and then that's added to this chain of transactions on this public ledger that everyone sees, and becomes part of the next starting point for the next block of transactions. So really, it's like basically if everyone had a spreadsheet open, and it was all being encrypted and whatnot. But if someone moves a coin, from one account to another, it immediately shows up, and it's basically that kind of thing. There's not actually any value associated with these objects, except what people will take as payment, and kind of the free market is deciding that. What differentiates that from a digital currency background, or for digital currency, is it's not a centralized, system that's private, and it occurs along private channels and whatnot. This is a very public, very visible infrastructure that anyone can just see at any time. Doesn't need to be audited. It's self-auditing. Everyone sees the audited file. So when we're talking about digital currency, the words are important because some of this is digital fiat currency. We're talking about central banks putting these numbers in this balance sheets that occur on this private X25 banking network and et cetera. But this is something that occurs in the public, and it's an encrypted channel. It's based on distrust. It require any trusted party to make sure that the numbers are right. I mean, this is all occurring in real time by everyone. Everyone's participating in this process, and that's kind of the dividing line between the say.
So does it have the power to take away the current banking system as it is set up with the World Bank and so on, because it doesn't require a bank to approve your transactions? It's done real time between two people, the buyer and the seller, and there's no middle person?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you could even take it one step farther. I mean, you could take anybody's credit card and you could take your credit card number and the expiration and the little 3-digit code, maybe your zip code, and you could use that as a coordinates to create a Bitcoin address, and you could actually, just change the protocol on any card reading device and have it, go through the Bitcoin network rather than go through the banking network if the banking network were to fail. So it's just a matter of creating, the way where Bitcoin's at right now is that, for something to be usable, it has to be usable at the, I don't know if it's the third grade level or the 3-year-old or 4-year-old level, but, you have to be able to have this, transaction take place. You have to be able to go down and understand what it is and go buy a piece of fruit or something for mom, it has to be understandable by everyone. And right now it like you said, that there's now really that's come to be. I don't know about PayPal, but this Shift card, this Bitcoin-denominated credit card is fantastic. Anybody can use that. But it is tied to you have to be using the Coinbase, a digital currency aggregator, which is highly regulated, and it's tied to your fiat bank account. And you can certainly. You can certainly start using Bitcoin, but in the case of a total failure or a lacking the capability or not wishing to use anything to do with the central banks, you still can't do that with the Shift card. It's not really independent of the central banking system, but it's certainly possible to do completely independent transaction of any central bank and just use Bitcoin. Absolutely.
Great. Well, my other question is too, how does it trade like a Wall Street trade? Does the value of it fluctuate up and down? And if so, why?
Well, since it's a smaller market with fewer transactions, and it's subject to. It's basically like any, it's considered a commodity now in the United States. But it's very volatile. You'll have something as simple as one of the Bitcoin team come out and say, "Oh, I'm very frustrated with this. It's going to go nowhere. I'm writing its epitaph again for the 200th time," and all of a sudden the price drops very dramatically for a minute. If you've heard that from maybe a blue chip stock, some disgruntled person, you might may or may not see any impact on the stock price, but in this case, it's more volatile in the sense that there's fewer people using it. It's newer. It does have some real unknowns as far as what's going to happen when, and so as the edge, the threshold we reach of how are we going to solve this problem, it can be very confusing. People will sell, or there can be a big drop. We've noticed last time there was a big drop. I think it was when Greece was about to not take the bailout. There was a big surge. I think that was the way it went down. But it's a little more volatile because it's a little more intangible. It's hard. Anyone can understand, frozen concentrated orange juice or wheat prices or whatever. But Bitcoin is like, It's a little out there, and people are just starting to experiment with it. And it doesn't help that these central bank CEOs are trying to, yes, the blockchain is important, and there's really no blockchain without the digital currency itself. I mean, that's just an absurd idea. Anyone can have a log file. I mean, it's not exactly new technology. So I guess that's maybe how I'd answer that.
Yeah.
But maybe,
well, it's interesting that the banks don't want the log, they don't want the blockchain. Is that because it's not traceable, but it's not controllable from the way that they've been typically handling banking in general? And that's why honestly, when I think about the current banking system, I think about there's been a lot of a war and a lot of things that have happened on this planet because of the current banking cartel, of the current banking system, the way it's set up. It's not set up to help people. It's not set up to really benefit the humanity. It's set up to be very controlling. It's set up to be very dominating, to make a lot of money off of people. So when I hear you say a comment like that, it makes me wonder, well, are the bank CEOs not wanting the blockchain, which is clearly associated to Bitcoin, because it takes some of that power out of their hands?
Oh yeah, they're first trying to do some controlled opposition there. I mean, there's absolutely no benefit that a bank could possibly have by making them lose control. They just want to pay homage to this idea and somehow still think they can continue to print the money out of nothing, and then somehow become more innovative by using this distributed log idea and calling it blockchain, and ignoring the fact that the blockchain is made of Bitcoin or whatever digital currency. And another feature of this is that any transaction that is recorded can embed all kinds of information publicly. I mean, you can have put your dissertation in. I mean, conceivably by a really complex transaction. But the blockchain can become this repository for any kind of text or message, or message in a bottle, or whatever might be desired. But it's not censorable. No government agency can go, I'm filing an injunction against Bitcoin to make sure that this information didn't get put on the blockchain. I mean, it's over. It's done. It's never ever going to come off of that blockchain. So does
that? Let me just make sure I understand you right. Does that mean then that the blockchain is transparent in that aspect?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a site called Graffiti, I think. Look up Graffiti and Bitcoin, anybody that wants to do that. But you can just write out your message. It can be as long as it wants to be, and it'll encode it into a set of Bitcoin transactions that, you spend the transaction, and bang, it's in the blockchain forever. I mean, it's always going to be there. It will never vary. It can't be shut down. It can't be not found if you go looking for it. So, yeah, very definitely.
Well, that sets up a kind of interesting game, I think, between the current system and a new system. So if we were to replace the banking system as it is today on the planet with a global digital currency, don't you think that the people who are in power now would really want to control whatever does replace the banking system, so that, one, they can make money off of it still, and two, they can still maintain control? So do you feel that in some sense Bitcoin is kind of like on the edge of just coming out to be really, kind of global in a sense, and, to transition every household over to using Bitcoin or to use a digital currency would take some time, but it also takes some marketing, and it also takes some planning with the current complex. So don't you think that this would be something that they've been looking at and planning and trying to take control of for some time now? Or do you think this is a random, sudden, here it is, we're here to stay, and now we have to deal with it kind of thing?
Well, okay. There are a couple things on that. We can look at how different governments approach the issue, and what is the extent to which they control it, influence, or whatever. Maybe some try to co-opt it. And then the other thing is what is on the surface of what's possible and what may actually be going on. There is, we don't know. It brings points. So, I mean, first thing, the governments want to control it, et cetera. I mean, You can look at one of the earliest adopters of attempting to do a cryptocurrency on a national level was Aurora Coin. That was Iceland trying to get into that and to do some special stuff. And one of the things that happened there was very quickly, since it was not an established network, there was a lot of available computing power there to do the 51% attack, because that thing was forked several times from the moment, pretty much out of the gate, weeks or months after when it was dead. So basically, if one entity can get 51% of the computing power, they can subvert the entire that whole branch of the currency. So other governments have tried to ban it. Other governments try to work with it. Now we're under the commodity exchange rules here in the United States, which but there's an internet blackout button. There can be an order that's given that shuts down the internet. But more importantly, I would say that there's probably a button you could push to. These Bitcoin transactions have a certain signature. They have a certain look and feel of the packets that are used to interact with them, whether you're anonymous or not, to where you could probably really mess with, there's already been distributed denial of service attacks against Bitcoin and other currencies. There's certainly cyber warfare going on out there that can have a detrimental impact. And different agencies and governments are more or less interested in doing that. But, we've had kind of a almost laissez-faire kind of a attitude towards it that we see in the United States. And I don't think it's because, the intelligence agencies are, they're not going to take any chances or risks. I mean, they're not. The central banks, the way that the hand in glove with the government. I mean, they're not going. We don't know what's going on at a certain level. And just to give you an example, we know right now. You mentioned quantum computing. We know right now about the Google IBM quantum computer, and it's just many orders of magnitude faster than anything that's presently available. Now, that's just the one we know about, and that's just one collaboration that we know about. So in terms of this dark web, what's visible, what's not, I mean, we know that there are huge supercomputing facilities that, to what degree you could turn that into cryptocurrency mining, I don't know, but I have a feeling that there's ways and means to where it's to certain governments or certain governmental alliances benefit to roll with it, because at any given point they could probably just turn up the volume and then they have the 51%. Now, I don't know if that's mathematically feasible right now, but I don't know. We don't know how many of these big computers are out there and how much processing power they could turn on. It will, but I'm thinking that. I think we just hit the exabyte or something. There was some milestone that was recently reached on the amount of total computing power that's being thrown at this Bitcoin network. I'd venture to say that there is a vulnerability with the quantum computing in the hands of certain agencies working in tandem. They could probably very, not only feasibly, but also very quietly turn the tables. And right now there's a lot of press, I don't know, what was it, the guy that the Bitcoin author came out and said, China controls all this stuff now and whatnot. Well, maybe China does and maybe China doesn't, but I think that there's a lot that's not known there that's kind of this gray area, like this football field where, there's going to be some scrimmages down here, and, it's not exactly going to be visible, though. It might be quite subtle, and no one knows who Nakamoto is. I mean, that was... who was that? I mean, was that one person? Was that an agency? Was that a military operation? I mean, where did that come from? So even though the cryptography element may not be easily crackable, we really don't know what kind of conceptual vulnerabilities there might be in the whole apparatus. And that's something that is a matter of, we're aggregating the best minds on these public forums, and then sometimes they're being censored and sometimes not by certain individuals. But one really has to do a lot of quantitative analysis to get to the heart of what the future is of this and what the vulnerabilities are. But in the meantime, without having to get too speculative, just to be able to go, okay, well, in the immediate future, Bitcoin's probably going to go this way, and we can probably use it. And if it does die, there's another one. There's plenty of them. There's hundreds of cryptocurrencies out there right now, and some are more transparent than others. But it's trivial to go from Bitcoin to another currency. Technologically, it's very simple. You could go from the shipped card to the shoe card, and all of a sudden it's in Litecoin or Dogecoin or something like that. And so it's no matter what happens in a certain branch of this, there's multiple redundant paths towards the same end. And depending on the mood of the people and the idea that's taken as to what creates the substantiality or why there's buy-in to it. Any killer idea, that everyone says, yeah, let's do it this way, could be the golden ticket, and all of a sudden that's going to be the prevailing cryptocurrency, and that's a trivial matter. It can happen at any time.
Yeah, so it almost feels like Bitcoin's a trial run kind of feel. It's got a trial run feel to me sometimes. I don't know. Quantum computers, what exactly are we talking about when someone says quantum computer? Everyday language, everyday people like myself going to work 9 to 5 and doing our thing, and we hear the word quantum computers, and it doesn't really have context for our lives. What are we talking about when we say the word quantum computer? Why should we care, and what are the potentials?
The computing technology, it evolved out of the diode to the transistor, the switching, ones and zeros, and that was all based on the flow of electrons through a substrate of, semiconductor, silicon or germanium, but all silicon, these days. But with the quantum environment, you're dealing with, physical particles at a deeper level. You're not just dealing with on or off. You're dealing with quantum state of you can have something instead of a 0-1. It's either basically on off sideways or something else, and it's more of a three-dimensional kind of approach to being able to do processing at a every interval, okay, just try to back up. It's like, if some process is running at 2 gigahertz, that means it's doing 2 billion analysis per second, trapped in time here. We're going to do, 2 billion of these processes of 1 or 0 on these, logic fields. And this is not easy. I'll try to make it simple. Basically, anything that the computer is doing now, it's able to do not only faster, but pretty much like multidimensional switching. So it's able to do things at exponential, several orders of magnitude faster and more robust. It's not just simple an either-or decision. It can take in more features of every slice of time, every billionth of a second. You can get more, more bang for the buck. So it's a way to do things that create possibilities for logic or analysis or artificial intelligence or et cetera that weren't previously possible just by sheer the brute force required to do something like that. Like, let's say you wanted to take one person's face and match it, immediately over the entire, breadth of every single person in the world and find out who that was. Those kind of instant, realizations through, if you have a big enough, memory and big enough, bandwidth for your computing backplane. You can access that in a quantum computing type of environment, whereas some simpler thing might have to have basically a associative memory array with a lot more fabric, a lot more storage. Not necessarily storage, but the linear way that it approaches the problem makes some of the applications less feasible. So that's the kind of stuff. It's like, okay, even right now, like SoundHound, you can play a little song and part of a song, and it immediately gets the signature of that and pulls, through every last song that is in the musical database. Oh, it's this song. Obviously it's this song, but this type of technology was, almost, unheard of, before that came out. Well, that kind of leap in computing power and, just using it to, what I see going on with that is it's a lot of military analysis, a lot of behavioral analysis, a lot of, metafile analysis of people's habits, psychological, social, profiles of things, and going to huge links to just basically get in someone's head and basically use it as a control, command and control mechanism. I think that's a lot of really what's going on with that technology.
Interesting that you say that, because when you were talking, and thank you for that, when you were talking about it, the first thing that came to my mind was, we are such a digital age. We have cell phones and we walk around and we log our whole lives from the time we get up to the time we go to bed, whether it's social media, texting, whatever app we're using. So is this a possible way, you have the NSA, you have the big data, facilities in Utah, United States, and elsewhere. Those are the ones we know about. And you have all of this data being gathered from cell phones, and it's going into these data farms. And is it really to just ultimately profile people to the point where they can be so understood that you can just press a button and manipulate their life to whatever degree, whoever is pushing the button wants to?
I don't think you need quantum computing to do that, but that is certainly almost definitely being done right now with Facebook. Anytime you like something, there's no benefit in you liking something. There's no benefit in the person that's having their stuff liked. That's creating, purchasing profiles, and then on a law enforcement and, command control level, it's doing extremely intricate behavioral analysis and psychological profiling that, there's this constant spontaneously exploiting these data streams to find stuff that you would not normally be able to go looking for, and then that's compounded and it's continued to do exactly what you're saying. So, to whatever extent that is being used for that purpose, we don't know. We don't really see any evidence so much of that, but I would say it's certainly the mechanism has already been created. It's already dumping this information. What we can do right now with Facebook, I want to find, Billy Joe Jim Bob that I knew in third grade, and, I think he lives in Ontario. Well, you can barely find that information. You could type Billy Joe Jim Bob in and go through 16 pages of, information that may or may not come up the same every time you do the search. But I guarantee if you're some three-letter, alphabet soup agency, you want to find Billy Joe Jim Bob in Ontario, you got the back door into that SQL database. You're going to find every last thing you want, including all of the other behavioral and associative analysis and people's browsing habits and their, up to and including all the back doors and all of the Trojans that have been put in people's systems that have been mining their data. You can get a pretty comprehensive heartbeat on any individual, all their friends, all their habits, all their assets, all their bank accounts, all their passwords. It's all there for the taking, and it's already been taken because we've already given it away. Part of the terms of service of Facebook is that basically you're owned. The moment you log in, you're owned by Facebook and your data, and you'll never get it back. So all this information can and will be used against you by not only court of law, but by every mom's basement dweller and Chinese hacker and everybody else that just wants to get out there and just stir up the pot. So beware.
Sure, we've seen that. We've seen that. Yeah, we've actually seen evidence of that happen in news cases in mainstream media where they talk about different things, or somebody's post led to an arrest or something like this. So that's already starting to happen. Or jobs can discriminate against people because of their social media profiles, and so on. So I have a question. Cloning Facebook pages. Is it possible? Have you ever heard of that? What is it? Somebody mentioned that to me, and I was quite perplexed about what that meant. Something about cloning someone's Facebook page and being able to basically see their page real time as if they're logged into it. Is that a reality?
Yeah, I mean, that code is pretty easy. Facebook, I mean, you can write applications that dump, there used to be a shell-oriented, Unix shell-oriented Facebook client where you could, pull the different people's information up at the command line and whatnot, and they kind of shut that down relatively recently. But, if you're a programmer and, have some time on your hands or some avid interest, you can do a lot of things like that. But a lot of this is, simply, I've been approached by cloned Facebook pages looking to friend me, and a sister, your kissing cousin of that is the mysterious people that appear in your friends list, but you have no idea how they became your friend. But they're there, for some reason, and, who knows what it is. But a lot of it is not as sinister as it is just, mundane. I mean, it's some kid in, Lagos, Nigeria, that's part of a 419 crew that's just gone and copied someone's dating profile or whatever, has set up shop on Match.com or Facebook, and is engaged in portraying themselves as you or somebody else, and it's just looking for a few bucks here and there. It's not really any mastermind. It's just someone that is exploiting some little vulnerability or hole in the open wound that is Facebook security, and it's free for all. So, not quite the problem that some of this other stuff is, but definitely annoying to be sure.
So it is possible. It's just amateur compared to some of the other things we're talking about. So conscious artificial intelligence. It's a constant question in the circles of higher realms of technology. What does it mean for an artificial intelligence to be conscious? Is it a reality already, or is it something we're headed into?
Consciousness, we usually apply that to bodies. Like the symptom of consciousness is, the body is moving around, and when the body stops moving around, we can pretty sure that the symptom is that body's no longer conscious. When we're talking about digital infrastructure, it's a little harder to find symptoms of consciousness. There's a Turing test, which is, at some threshold of intelligence, you have managed to fool a certain, percentile of intelligence into thinking that this is a sentient, being. Something that can actually think on its own accord, it's always going to be based on rules that were programmed for it to analyze data, from sensory input, and to make decisions based on different criterion from other sensory input. So when we talk about thinking in that sense, we're talking about assigning a stack of priorities to like a server or a program. You're giving it certain priorities of input. Like, if something is really, really hot, like the house about to burn down, your priority is to, call the fire department as opposed to, bring the sysadmin his lunch. And then there's interrupts that happen. I mean, basically we're talking about, setting something up to have the trappings of being able to think, but the actual imparting of consciousness it's a hard thing to ascertain. I mean, this is a question that's philosophical along spiritual lines. It's gone back thousands of years, especially into the Vedic system. But actually being able to see something that is sitting there conversing with you and that's learning not only new information, but how to process that information and correlate it with the existing information to form more complex ideas or capabilities, and maybe increasing the scope of its ability to process its existing sensory input, or to aggregate, or to extend its sensory apparatus. I don't know what kind of program it would take to do something like that. I mean, even in genetic material, you have a body that is providing functions, and but it doesn't mean that it's alive. That something be stillborn. I mean, it has to be this concept of the soul. There's a soul that is the conscious entity that has intelligence, and that it's controlling its mind, and then the body and its input and output to the senses are being utilized. So unless there is an ability to create a bona fide conscious entity that somehow stands the bar of consciousness, not just at the Turing test level, but in the same kind of features you'd find in a human being or even an animal, it's going to be a hard. It's going to be illusory. I think it's probably the new perpetual motion device. I mean, in times past, like that was the impossible to achieve feature, and then eventually it was created, but hundreds of years later. I mean, that's kind of the free energy technology we're seeing now. But the artificial intelligence, the actual ability to create consciousness, I'm skeptical. I'm not really seeing any examples of any bona fide creation of actual consciousness that would pass on a philosophical platform of consciousness, like the Purusha of the Vedas. You're not creating a Purusha. You might have some complex, natural process, but it's not going to actually possess consciousness. It's going to be a thinking machine.
Yeah, what I kept thinking when you were talking too was that the amount of data that is farmed and sifted and sorted through, you could really understand and study human behavior almost to the point of mimicking it perfectly. And in that mimic, we might actually think we're seeing something that's conscious or has a soul,
Absolutely.
but doesn't really.
That is totally correct. Yeah. Absolutely. You can mimic using this information. You could find a signature for everyone's mind, and look at the words they're using and how they think and what their habits are and whatnot. You could probably, if you didn't know someone in a foreign country and all of a sudden, that person was taken out and this emulator was put in place using all this aggregated stuff, you could probably fool someone for a very, very, very long period of time into thinking that they're interacting with the person, and when in fact that they were just using the energy signatures that were created from the log files and the meta files and et cetera, et cetera. I mean, you probably could do that. That would be achievable quite easily.
Well, that's probably what we're looking at. I mean, if you think about it, the information can be used against people in terms of the government. If you ever do something to piss them off, they can find you in a second. We have such vast reaches. It's almost like we have no privacy anymore. There's nothing that's private. And if you do find something that's private, it is probably not as private as you think. And we can change our passcodes and change our names and do things on a regular basis to kind of help hide ourselves or give us some sense of animosity. But do you think that we've lost all sense of privacy when it comes to the digital age? Because that's really what we're in.
Yeah, privacy no longer exists. I mean, the only thing you can do is delay certain information from being released for a certain period of time by using currently state-of-the-art, encryption protocols. But there's every last piece of information that you put out there is irrevocable. Someone's got it somewhere. It will be used against you eventually, most likely. There's no place to hide. There's no place where there's you can't be heard. So, I think that instead of going, I mean, and the thing is that there's been technology like, remote viewing for a very long time that demonstrates, you can go around to someone's desk and read the manuscript on their desk without ever physically going there or having any, eavesdropping equipment. And just the idea that, if you go into more the metaphysical context or spiritual context, I mean, if the God is always knowing what you're doing, or if at some point, your life is in these Akashic records or something, and you're able to, all this stuff is accessible. There was never any privacy to begin with. It's always been just, an illusion. So I guess that would just it should, instead of becoming depressed about that, if there's no more illusory privacy, I mean, figure if you have an audience that consists of these government agencies and whoever else, I mean, pick your message a good one, speak something that's going to create some positive change and maybe influence the minds and hearts of the people listening to it. Because that's really the only recourse at this point. I mean, you got to make the words that you say and the things you put out there to be worth listening to and doing. Otherwise, the forces that are doing the listening and the analysis are the ones that are in charge, so to speak. But listening doesn't make you in charge, but I'll explain it like this, and that is like, let's say, we want to develop a business plan, and we're going to collaborate, and we're going to put that on Google Docs. And, we got some original intellectual property and some ideas, and we're going to collaborate on that. And the thing is that these contractors that are working for these agencies that are up there, they're going to be pulling that data down, and they're looking at that and they go, oh, wow, Hillary's got some cool ideas. Why don't we sell that to our, Joe in our pocket over here at this corporation? Hey, look what Hillary's doing. Why don't you guys see what you can think of that? And it's not like it's this. Big brother is looking at me and trying to keep me down. This is like, no, I'm stealing your intellectual property. I'm for personal gain. I'm giving it to a friend or scratching someone's back. I'm breaching someone else's information without their consent. I'm not obeying any of the intellectual property laws or copyright or whatever. I'm just outright stealing the data. And the reason I'm doing it is because I can and because it's there. And, and while I'm at it, even though Hillary's running this red phone program, I'm just going to, bust into that and set up a private data stream. I mean, before her information's encrypted, every time she talks to Stuart, with this red phone, this encrypted thing, I'm going to listen to everything they say. And that's going on constantly. And it's a real shame because it's very hard to have any privileged or private information without it being, raped from the get-go by anyone that wants to at that level of the game, because there's really no ethical, behavior going on. And the proof of that there's no ethical behavior there is because if you look at, system administration, there's ethics involved. You don't break into someone's data. You don't break into their email. You don't go look in their email. You don't use that for your own private, enjoyment or purposes. If you see a virus, you erase it. If you see malware, you alert everyone and then you remove it. Well, what's going on now with these this idea of how we use information? Well, we're going to break into someone's email. We're going to watch what they're saying. We're going to put viruses of our own on their system that's going to steal data for us. And then we're going to look at it. We're going to do whatever we want with it. And if we can make money off of it or if we can, whatever we want to do with it, we're going to do that. And that's like the opposite of ethics. It's like the epitome of exploitation.
Yeah.
And government and our system administrators are doing. It's absolutely the opposite of anything ethical or beneficial to everyone that's underneath that, authority.
I just had this happen to me with my content, some of my show content. It was stolen from me and then put out through every idea that I had with this was taken and put out through their own platform. And so as I'm listening to you, I'm just sitting here smiling because I know that this is real. This really does happen. We are out of time. Can you believe how fast that went? I would like to invite you back for another show at some point to talk about some more intricacies of what we were touching base on. Stuart, how can people reach you if they have questions? If they would like some advice on something, do you do consultations for people?
Sure. I'm available at Stuart, Stuart.Trusty, Trusty @gmail.com, and all that information will be just between me and them and the NSA and everyone else that's watching the Google search.
I have to say, Hey, thank you very much. This was a very informative show. I enjoyed listening to it, and as the host, I know that means if I'm enjoying listening to it, other people are enjoying listening to it as well. Thanks so much for giving us some insight into some very important topics.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll talk to you later.
You're listening to YinRadioTV. I'm your host, Hillary Raimo. Thank you so much for joining me here tonight. Until next time, namaste, everyone.